When we say we picture pizza, pasta, fashion, Rome, Venice. But how can one country be so different from region to region? Why do the North and South still feel like two completely different worlds? Why did these lands spend centuries fighting each other, ruled by foreign empires, and only recently become one nation? This is the history of Italy. No boring dates, just the juicy stuff. And yes, it's going to get weird. Real weird. Enjoy the video, let's get into it. Before Rome, Italy was basically a giant historical junkyard of tribes and cultures. Some came, some stayed, some just vanished. In the north, you had Ligurians and Celts. In the south, Greeks, who basically turned it into southern Greece with philosophy, wine, and beach life. And right in the center, the Etruscans. They had their own language, and to this day, no one really knows where they came from. It's like they just logged into the server and never dropped a username. Each tribe did its own thing. No one was in charge. Trying to invent Italy at that point would have been like turning your apartment building into a boy band. Good luck with that. But in the middle of all this chaos, somewhere in a swampy backwater, Rome pops up. At first, just a tiny town nobody took seriously. But they had one special trick. They didn't level up strength, they leveled up skills. Like in an RPG, instead of pumping damage, health, and rage, they maxed out organization, logic, and communication. The Romans weren't the strongest, but they always knew who to call and where to build a road. First, they took over their neighbors, then the Etruscans, then the Samnites. Next stopped the Greek colonies in the south. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome basically controlled the entire peninsula. No one's calling it a country yet, but the roads are smooth, the discipline is brutal, and people are starting to realize these guys aren't going anywhere. Fun fact, the Etruscans had a surprisingly progressive culture, especially for ancient times. Their women had almost the same rights as men. They could attend banquets, own property, even sit and dine alongside men, which absolutely horrified the Greeks, and later, the Romans. One Greek writer even said, "These Etruscans do everything wrong, their women talk." So, Rome wasn't just dominating the Apennines anymore, it started steamrolling everything in its path. Carthage? Obliterated. Greece? Snatched. Egypt? Let's just say Cleopatra was already thinking, maybe this whole Mark Antony thing's not worth it. By the 1st century BCE, Rome ruled the entire Mediterranean. It wasn't just a republic anymore, it was a full-blown conquest machine. But inside, things were getting tense. Who's in charge? Senators? Generals? Politicians? And right then entered Julius Caesar. First, he conquers Gaul. Then, he marches back to Rome and pretty much takes over the whole show. People either feared him or worshipped him, or both. Until one day, well, let's just say the Senate held a very sharp meeting. 23 stab wounds. That's the most teamwork Rome ever saw. After his death, the Republic officially ends and the Empire begins. First emperor? Caesar's nephew, Octavian Augustus. Rome is now the Roman Empire. Over the next 2 centuries, it reaches its peak. Britain, Mesopotamia, the entire Mediterranean coast. Roman roads, Roman architecture, Roman culture everywhere. But with that scale came problems. Emperors started dropping like flies. Some ruled for years, others for weeks. Assassinations, coups, civil wars. It became normal. By the 3rd century, the cracks were showing. Economic crises, rebellions, barbarian raids. Then, in 395 CE boom, Rome splits in two. Western Roman Empire, with Rome as its capital. Eastern Roman Empire based in Constantinople. And just 81 years later, in 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire finally falls. The last emperor? Romulus Augustulus. Kinda ironic, named after both Rome's first king and its first emperor. They kicked him off the throne like an old coat off a hanger. Rome fell. But Italy, still here. Only now fragmented again. Barbarians, kingdoms, pure chaos. Another interesting fact. At one point, Rome had an official job called Star Clock Turner, because sundials, obviously, don't work at night. His job? Literally making sure the water clocks and hourglasses kept ticking after sunset. Also, during fancy banquets, rich Romans sometimes kept a servant standing nearby, whose only job was to whisper, "Remember, you're mortal," just in case they were getting too cocky. Or maybe just to keep the vibes in check. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Italy turned back into a mosaic. No single ruler. Just invasions, chaos, and everyone fighting over every little scrap of land. First came the Ostrogoths. Then the Byzantines tried to win it back. But surprise, the Lombards rolled in from the north, took over central and northern Italy, split it up, and formed their own kingdoms. Southern Italy? That was a whole different universe. You had Byzantines, Arabs, Normans, basically anyone who fancied a quick visit stopped by for tea. And right in the middle, Rome. Not the center of an empire anymore, but still kind of a big deal because of the Pope. Milan, Genoa, Florence, Venice, each had its own money, army, and massive ego. They fought, traded, made alliances, then broke them a week later. Each city was like its own tiny country. Any idea of a unified Italy? Completely off the table. Fun fact, by the 11th, 12th centuries, Venice got so insanely rich that its ruler, the Doge, would literally marry the sea once a year. He'd sail out on a massive ship and toss a gold ring into the water, symbolizing Venice's dominion over the sea. Yeah, that's how hard this man flexed, 14th century. Most of Europe? Darkness, plague, wars, total collapse. But Italy? Italy's vibing. The Renaissance kicks off right here, and with it, the ideas that will eventually drag Europe out of the mud. Florence becomes the capital of culture. This is where Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, and Michelangelo are doing their thing. The Medici family? Not royalty, but basically running the show. Super rich bankers, art sponsors, and professional schemers. Meanwhile, Venice, Milan, Naples also at their peak. Everyone's competing to look richer, smarter, and classier than the next city. But while art is leveling up like crazy, Italy as a country, still not a thing. And of course, our fan fact. Leonardo da Vinci wasn't just a painter, he was also officially hired as a military engineer. He pitched his services to the Duke of Milan, with a portfolio that included multi-barreled cannons, armored vehicles, and even submarines. But he intentionally left out the full submarine blueprint, because, in his words, humans are way too good at using things for evil. Late 18th century, the French Revolution tears through Europe like a meteor. And right behind it comes Napoleon. He invades Italy, smashes Austria, and sets up a bunch of puppet republics. The Cisalpine Republic, the Parthenopean Republic, even something called the Italian Republic. Yeah, but it's his version. Then he loses, and it all gets handed back to Austria. In 1815, the Congress of Vienna redraws the map, and most of Italy falls back under Habsburg control. So Italy's fragmented again, but this time, not feudal style. Now, it's colonial bureaucracy. And under that stiff Austrian boot, a thought begins to spread. Wait a minute, what if we just made one Italy? Fun fact, Napoleon didn't just invade, he looted a ton of Italian art and hauled it back to France. A lot of masterpieces from northern Italian museums, still sitting in the Louvre today, 19th century. Italy's still a patchwork mess, some regions under Austria, some under France, others ruled by the Pope, and a few technically independent but not really a country yet. But the spirit of freedom is in the air. A bold idea starts to grow. What if we made Italy one country? The most eager are the folks in Piedmont, Sardinia, a northern kingdom with big dreams. They start pushing the Austrians out of the north and waving the unification flag. And then, out of nowhere, here comes Giuseppe Garibaldi from the south. A total legend, man of the people. In 1860, he gathers a volunteer army called the Thousand Red Shirts and lands in Sicily. They march through almost the entire south with barely any resistance. And Garibaldi? He gives the land to the king of Sardinia. Just hands it over, all for the cause of unification. In 1861, Italy is officially born with some fine print. Rome is still under papal control. It won't join until 1870, after the French finally leave. And just like that, after 15 centuries of fragmentation, a united Italy finally appears on the map. All right, here is our fan fact. Fun fact. When Garibaldi conquered the south, he could have taken power for himself. Instead, he met with King Victor Emmanuel II, shook his hand, and said, "Here's your Italy." Then, he literally rode off into the sunset. One of the rare times in history, a revolutionary gave up power just for the idea. After unification, Italy was like a brand new player, logging in to the big European server for the first time. In World War I, it joins the Allies, hoping to score some territory. Technically wins, but inside the country, crisis, unemployment, disappointment, total vibe crash. And in that chaos, in 1922, enter Benito Mussolini. He builds a fascist state and promises to bring back the glory of the Roman Empire. He gets involved in everything: propaganda, media control, personality, cult. The guy literally tries to drain swamps and count every grain of wheat and calls it progress. In 1935, he invades Ethiopia. Later, he gets cozy with Hitler. Then comes World War II, and boom, Italy's back on the battlefield. In 1943, Mussolini is overthrown, but Germany quickly swoops in and occupies the north. Now it's civil war inside a world war. Allies in the south, Nazis and leftover fascists in the north. By 1945, it's over. Fascism loses. Mussolini is executed. In 1946, Italy holds a national referendum. The people vote to ditch the monarchy. Italy officially becomes a republic. End of an era. Fun fact, in his final days, Mussolini tried to escape to Switzerland, dressed as a German soldier, but he got recognized by his boots. Yep, he wore his signature shiny fancy boots, the ones everyone in Italy knew him for. Basically, his disguise failed because he couldn't resist a dramatic footwear moment. After World War II, Italy began rebuilding fast. In the 1950s and 60s, it saw a real economic boom, especially in the north, Milan, Turin, Genoa. Factories, cars, fashion, design, this is where the magic happened. The south? Still poorer, heavily reliant on government support, often overlooked by politicians. The gap between north and south only kept growing. And then, an old problem in a modern outfit, the mafia, Cosa Nostra, Camorra, and 'Ndrangheta. These groups control entire regions, businesses, even politics. Some judges who tried to fight the mafia were literally blown up in central Palermo. Still, Italy rises. It's a G7 country, a cultural powerhouse, a global icon of food, fashion, and architecture. But somehow, still not fully united. The North says, "Why are we the ones paying for you?" The South replies, "Because you once conquered us." Same country, but you can still feel the divide. In the accents, the habits, the income levels, even the laws. Also, our fun fact. Some Italian families can trace their lineage all the way back to ancient Rome. Like, their family trees go back 2,000 years uninterrupted. Meanwhile, you forgot your email password. Again, Italy is a country that's always striving to be united, but it stays brightly colorful, just like its flags on the map. Every region has its own story, its own accent, its own heroes. And maybe that's its real strength. Not that it's just one, but that it's many, and still together. If you enjoyed the video, show some love with a like and subscribe. And drop a cool comment, I'll try to reply to everyone. Arrivederci.